You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. And welcome to Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee, joined today by Simon Fudge of Soccer Talk Vancouver. Simon, what a night it was last night. Not the expected result, but watching Vancouver in the semifinal of the CONCACAF Champions League, what's one word that you can describe it to start off?
Well, class, basically, in the end. I'd use a better phrase by saying that it was men versus boys in the end. Tigres were that much better, that much more polished, that much more capable in every aspect of their game. You know, when people talk about why this might be one of the best assembled Mexican sides in some time, I think I could see a little bit of why that was the case, because it wasn't just their ability and their threat to be dangerous on the attack. It was their ability to look, almost effortless in their defending, which I thought was probably one of the most impressive things with them last night. The fact that they made Alphonso Davies, who, obviously got thrusted into the game as early as he did for the injured Brek Shea, making him look the age that he was, look like a 16-year-old, underlined the quality of their players, particularly their two fullbacks, particularly the right back, Luis Rodriguez. He had Davies in his back pocket. There's no other way to describe it. And after the early goal that came from Brek Shea, we didn't see much more from the Caps in terms of chances that were developed, and particularly when the second half started, Tigres decided they were going to take things to another gear. Aquino on the left-hand side became a real threat. And then we had a world-class goal just after the hour mark from Andre Pierre Gignac. And I think in the end of the day, the best team won and showed, their quality over two legs. But the Whitecaps can take some pride in the fact that they did, ultimately, at the end of the day, have to force this team of high quality to have to use and show a bit of high quality to beat them. That it didn't necessarily have there wasn't goals that were scored from mistakes or anything of that sort. That they were beaten by a team that had more in the locker in their abilities than the other team, and used it to win the game. And there's no shame in that.
Oh no, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
When you look at the shots, 17 shots for Tigres, 3 for Vancouver, and the image that's getting stuck in my mind when I think about this is at the 89th minute, 4 Tigres player on the counter going towards goal, full clip. And I'm like, yeah, they never live up. They never let up. It's not about what's the score. It's not about the game management itself. It's about playing what we can play all the time. And Tigres, as a Mexican team, we have seen others like America, or that plays when they have to. In the second half of the second game, they open the valves and they go full clip and they score 4-5 and it's over. Tigres seems like they're trying to build a football project. They're trying to get a way of playing, keep that way, and always impose their style.
yeah, I mean, last night what they tried to do, especially when the early goal was scored by the Whitecaps by Brek Shea, and there was a bit of momentum had been driven, and we certainly then had a game to watch as a result. They were very much intent on trying to maintain their game and maintain the tempo of the game, which at times is trying to slowly build things out of the back. I thought coming here and being able to play on that turf surface would certainly suit the game, particularly if they were disciplined to knocking it around. But I think it actually probably took them the first half to get adjusted to the conditions, to get adjusted to the cool air that was coming through the roof, to getting adjusted to the turf surface. I was a little surprised that they were playing a little more direct than I thought, but part of me wondered if it was because they knew they had a bit of speed on the flanks, that they were trying to maybe get in behind the Whitecaps that way a little bit. But overall, I thought they needed, and it didn't really surprise me that they had to probably take the first half to get adjusted, go in at the break, have a conversation about it, and then come out and impose their will on the Caps. The thing is, the Caps had to match that. When they had the ball, when they were in possession, they had to be very good with it, and they weren't. And you could even see it just before the Gignac goal, that they weren't holding on to the ball as well as they could. They could have also, you could also be said that they were, their level of match fitness was just not at the same level. Laba, certainly in the first half, looked sensational, but he wasn't able to impose himself in the same way in the second half. Just to give you an example of one player. And in the end, certainly after the goal came, it allowed Tigres to just get control of everything and go on and win the game with relative ease, because there wasn't much that the Caps could do to match it. I mean, Montero and Davies, to name two, couldn't get in behind Tigres' backline. And when you have those types of issues, you're going to struggle to come up with that second goal. I mean, Bolaños had that chance early, right after the start of the half, and when you look at it, that had to be a goal. That had to be 2-0, because after that, there weren't really any other chances that tested Guzman in the Tigres goal, and the inevitable result played itself out.
Now, you mentioned Davies a few times. One of his, not, I want to say worst performances. He's still a 16-year-old kid, but not having the week to mentally prepare for a game, you're scheduled to be a substitute, and then Breckshay goes down with what seems to be a knee injury at the 4th minute, and you're literally thrust into a situation that you were not necessarily mentally prepared to, and Tigres took advantage of it. Is there any consequences of that game that will be seen in Davies' play, or should Davies use the youth of a 16-year-old and forget that night as quick as possible?
Well, he should learn from it more than anything. He went up against quality defending, the kind of defending. I mean, this is what makes the Mexican League the strongest in this region. Is here's a team that's got defenders who that have just that much more know-how, that probably go up against attackers that have that similar know-how, change of direction and so forth, that make it very challenging. Davies didn't have enough in his abilities to show how to get around such defenders, and it became fairly simple for them to defend against. It's not a game that he needs to forget about. It's a game that he needs to learn from. And, I think it's probably the kind of game last night that should fully underline anyone out there, particularly every Canadian soccer fan, that he's got a long, long way to go, particularly if you have ideas of him playing in Europe. I mean, that's the standard right there. And at this point in time, he will struggle against that quality. He has to polish his game to a level that he can match that quality, certainly in defending, and show that he has that ability to go over it. And it's also, unfortunately, a bit of a microcosm of the gulf in class between the kind of player that is being produced in this country to what we're dealing with our rivals in the CONCACAF region, and the long years of work that the game overall in this country has in front of itself, to have to produce players that can competently compete, particularly when it comes to the international level and World Cup qualifying and so forth. It's well. it's just, I'm sorry, but the thing is that for me, the whole thing was just a right proper lesson for him, a right proper lesson for Vancouver soccer fans, a right proper lesson for Canadian fans. There's every chance that he's got the potential of coming good, but all it did last night, all that did was just show that he has a long way to go, and he needs more time, and certainly more playing time in the club here and at the level that he's at to grow and get stronger before he faces up to the possibility of a challenge that is much higher.
No, Simon, I really I'm inspired by what you just mentioned. So in the second break, after the first segment, when we come back, Simon, we'll talk about Mexican player development versus North American player development, meaning Canada and United States, and where the damage is already done sometimes when the competitive level already tries to grab hold of players. Let's finish on Vancouver, though, for the end of this segment. Vancouver, a lot of people pressed the panic button in Vancouver since the beginning of the season. It's not as bad as it's actually felt. It's 1-1 this season. They do have a win. They do have some decent performances, and not necessarily lucky with the refereeing and red card, and discipline has been a factor. But if you look at some spurts, at some moments for 15, 20 minutes, you did see a project of Vancouver that could have potential. Does the narrative of the panic button came way too early?
Well, I think this is a club that's under a certain amount of pressure to deliver this season. Supporters here felt let down last year, and I think it just speaks to the sophistication of the marketplace as a soccer market here. They want a team that succeeds, particularly in this sport, and this club seems to get it has got itself into sort of this thing of saying they're doing it a certain way. And I don't think everybody that supports the club has bought in on that. So this is a big season for them in many respects, where they've got to show that what they're doing is working. Because I think there's quite a bit of doubt out there. There's quite a bit of doubt in terms of, I don't think there's a necessarily universal sense of support behind Carl Robinson with all supporters there. There isn't certainly a constant level of support towards the front office, and they're going into a very difficult stretch here, where I think 5 of the next 6 games, more or less, are on the road, and they've got to be able to find a way to pick up some points here after what has been a fairly slow start. It was a very good result last weekend. They had to have that. I did wonder in the back of my mind if they could get that result. I think that's certainly the case. But now they have, particularly off the back of this game and the effort that they tried to put in last night, to go to a place like Real Salt Lake that's trying to get its season going and try and come away with 3 points there, which they've got to try and do. But probably in the circumstances is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So, it's a you can see the potential, but if we keep talking about it being a potential and there's nothing that it delivers, particularly this season, then the pressure's just going to mount, and they've got to deliver something this season for this fan base, because that fan base had an expectation this time last year that they could do something, and they were let down. And the questions will be more frequent, and they'll be louder this year if this season kind of pans out along the same lines as last year. I think last night and Saturday gave very encouraging signs that you could see the pieces of a very good team. The upside they do have is the fact that they do have a lot of youth in their team. However, right now they do have injury issues. They've got Hurtado out on crutches with a leg injury, and he could be out for several weeks. And the Brek Shea injury last night, which looks like a knee, and he did leave the stadium on his own steam, but I certainly don't think he's going to be playing Saturday. He's going to be out for 2 or 3 weeks. So they're already now a bit thin in the midfield and up front. So I think that could further underline the urgency of doing more tweaking, trying to get at least another body and certainly another striker at some point here down the line to try and boost the ranks.
Brek Shea and Freddie Montero were the big acquisition just days before the beginning of the season. 5 weeks and a half in the season, Simon. What is your assessment of the Brek Shea and Freddie Montero acquisitions?
Well, I think it's been so-so. Brek Shea's spell has been really unfortunate. Everything from making stupid decisions to get himself sent off, to looking out of place and not in sync with his teammates, playing in different positions, to having a fantastic start last night, and then having only 7 minutes played, having to come out with a knee injury that is going to lay him up for at least a couple of weeks. To me, his spell hasn't really gotten going, as I don't think it has with Freddie either. I have concerns in that 4-2-3-1 with Freddie playing at the top of that formation if it worked for him. And last night, being against the quality of opposition they were playing, he couldn't really get into the game. But I just wonder if the likes of him and Shea are just need to try and get their way up into match fitness a little bit. And they're trying to get, they're just trying to get back up to a level. But it's been so-so. Not to say that they certainly won't come good, certainly from Montero, from when you think about Montero. But it kind of underlines, how much sort of support in the attack a guy like that needs to become effective. And so, there are players out that they don't have available right now, particularly like a Jordi Reyna, who, if he was available, what would this team look like in terms of its attacking dynamic? And is that something that we should keep in the back of our minds as we start to get into the summer and Reyna, it will be potentially fit enough to come back into the team? Hard to say, but it's been so-so from those two players, and I think that's certainly going to be one of the more interesting things to watch with this team as the season goes along.
Inspired by our previous conversation, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I will give my theory to Simon on why American and Canadian soccer is already behind when kids are 10 years old.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Simon, when we watch teams like Tigres play and we see those substitute players we never heard of come in the pitch and execute technically, tactically, athletically better than we have ever anticipated, it brings a question to mind. A lot of academies in Canada and North America, and the United States especially, start 12, 13, 14 years old at the elite level, and the damage is already done. We're already 6, 7, 8 years behind at that point. How do you want a kid to catch up that quickly when he doesn't have a ball at his feet at all time, which is the case for the Mexican players that have been developed by those great teams over the last 30 years? What do you think should we do? I know it's a big question, but at the development level, like kids, what's the secret? What does Mexico do better than we do?
Well, I think all the way through the system that they have better coaching. But I think the Mexican player, much like even the Central American player, there's a real inherent desire to perform and play the game and to succeed in the game. I think the pressures to try and play at the high level are such, and the competition is such that players have to develop to a certain level in order to make it. I think that's the big thing and the big difference, which is almost a cultural thing more than anything, between what you see with them and what you see with players out of this country. I mean, I think the big thing that's kind of letting us down, and it may even be an issue, I'd say, even in the United States, is sort of the local grassroots house league level and how the players are being developed at that level. There's probably I wouldn't be surprised if there's a majorly high level of inconsistency across the country in regards to that. So even when a young player that does have talent comes into any one of the professional clubs' academy systems or satellite academy systems, is like the Whitecaps have, the kind of things that they need to do to develop is quite vast. They may not necessarily need all that much to work their way all the way up to MLS, but certainly when it comes to having to go and play at the next level after that, there are things about playing at that level that they just don't have, particularly in terms of understanding game management as a player within a team concept, to skill set, to being able to defend and dispossess someone that you're marking with absolute effortless ease, not having to go to ground, make desperate challenges, for example. All those kinds of things. There's such a difference in what you see with those players, and all of it is kind of tied into everything. I mean, what has to get better? Well, certainly at the top end, MLS has got to get better overall, because I mean, we can go through the highlights every week, and we do see a lot of games that don't have a lot of very high quality. I mean, last week we almost had one of those typical weekends where the majority of games ended up being a draw. But I think one of the other major things is bad habits, and particularly around cheaply giving away possession of the ball. I think that's a big issue in North America with the game as a whole, and sort of why people can only see it as a league of a certain standard is because there isn't any one particular team that I can think of, for example, that we watch in MLS that shows itself to be so good and so polished at keeping the ball, and just doesn't rarely give it away. It'd be really interesting to sort of see a stat of the number of times in an MLS game teams give away a ball, and it measured with every team over the course of the season, because it'd probably be a very high statistic. And that goes all the way back, I think, as you say, to kids and so forth that don't have enough of a comfort on the ball, that they're able to just keep it when they have it. That it, in certain cases, someone plays the ball into their feet and whatnot, it gets away from them. So it's those little things that are a big that make a big difference. It really did. That was one other thing that really showed up last night in that Tigres Whitecaps game between the two teams. One team that not only knew how to keep possession, knew how to knock the ball around and always be the one to come out on top with it, but they were able to do so in comparison to another one that at times was welling it all over the place, and needlessly so, because they lacked the ideas, or they lacked in that very particular situation to know what to do next with it, and that, I think, comes back to how we work with players and what we get them to do, and getting them comfortable on the ball. And as you say, it isn't just that, but I mean, how much time are the kids in Canada and the United States spending playing by themselves?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to. And Simon, here, like, I've been to Mexico City, I've been to other places as well in the Caribbean, and I've seen soccer pitch everywhere, different shape, different forms, different iteration. You think it's just an alleyway, but it turns out to be a soccer pitch and stuff like that everywhere across the board. It's getting to be the case here, but the lack of infrastructures, weather, of course, is a a impeding aspect where for 4 or 5 months it's almost impossible to go play outside if you don't have a bubble, if there's not infrastructures to facilitate playing time, which means that if you don't have a lot of money and you can't rent spaces to play all the time, where there's no else to play. And for a kid, it takes the fun, the momentum, and it takes the learning aspect, the learning curve. It's longer when you have to always come back to what you learned the year before you move forward, instead of just having a constant growth line like in a graphic that never stops and dips, because you always keep on playing, you always keep on learning on what you have learned before and going deeper into techniques by using what you have learned and getting other techniques from there, and you practice and you play by yourself. The amount of time kids are playing with the ball at their feet compared to a Mexican kid, compared to another place in the world where the infrastructure is not necessarily that you need to pay, just the places to play, the places to execute, to practice by yourself. Now it's almost shunned upon in here in North America to go to see a kid by himself playing in a yard and hitting the wall with the ball to get the most amount of touches, whatever the case may be. Now we're like, it's not viewed the same way. The honing of your skills, the time with the ball, the solace of yourself and that round leather ball is what makes the difference. There's a great quote. I know it's a hockey quote, but the difference between greatness and super greatness is how you can keep up with something and keep up longer with it. And then you become better. I think that's what's missing. The drive, the motivation, the time spent alone on your free time with that ball to hone your skills, not only when you're in your academies and your teachers telling you, no, you actually learn better when you're using your own time to hone your own skills.
Yeah, I mean that's basically it. I'll give you an example. When I really started to get back into playing, even in Regina and Saskatchewan, I was playing outside. So in some ways, even in the cold, and we certainly do it by when we go out and play hockey in the local rinks outside. We need to have a bit of a culture that does that with soccer, believe it or not. And I think it is possible to be able to do that. But it is what's required if you're going to produce some of that special talent. They've got to be able to go out by themselves and try things. I remember when Peter Beardsley was here, kind of visiting the Whitecaps a few years ago, and how he talked about kids just have got to go out and improv and have the ability to improvise when they're on the ball and do things that. When they're with a team or under a particular coach, they're not going to be necessarily given the chance to learn, but they can certainly go and try something, because that was part of his development and upbringing. And certainly as a player, there was one that he was never. He was probably one of the more creative players that England has ever produced. So that's the. Those are the kinds of things that are missing, and I think, unfortunately, it is just the day and age, and the concerns, obviously, that parents have about leaving their kids unattended in a public space and that sort of thing. Because certainly in my time, there weren't the level of issues for me to go outside, just outside the door of my place, and play a sport. And let's say in this case, go out and knock a ball around. So. How you get back to that, how you get a kid to do all of that it's hard, but it is at the end of the day down to the youngster themselves to put in that extra time, to be encouraged to put in that extra time, by not just his parents, but his coaches in the soccer club that he plays for. That it isn't just sort of segmented into. When they go to practice, that's the time when they go and play soccer. And then when they're not doing that, they're off the ball.
Exactly.
I think the culture in many ways has to change so that it's, they have an interest and a keenness to get better all the time at any opportunity. But maybe, maybe the key ingredient is a desire to succeed, a desire to do well. And maybe slowly but surely we'll start to see more and more of that things happening. And it probably starts at the very top. We need certain breakthroughs to occur with either one of the MLS clubs in this country or with the national team at some point that make the kids want to go out and say, that's something that they would ultimately aim to try and do, is to try and make it. And so they will put in the extra time to do it, because the way things have gone for the last 20, 25 years, there hasn't been anything that a kid can point to say, that they would put in that extra time, other than maybe watching some of the very, very best players on television. But that's such a distance away, that if you took 10 kids that are into the game and you sort of say to them, do you think you can realistically make it, or make it by ultimately from where you are right now to play for Barcelona? They'd probably say no. I mean, I love watching them on TV, but that's just so far away. I mean, their ultimate dream would be to go and watch them live, if they could afford to do that.
Yeah, they have to. The belief has to be there. All right, Simon. Before we let
the belief definitely has to be there,
right?
But where do you drive the belief from? I think it drives from having teams in this country start to succeed. So
that's a good point. Well, what's going on at FIFA.com before we let you go, Simon?
Well, we're getting into a very busy period. The Beach Soccer World Cup is the first first FIFA tournament of the year coming up at the end of the month in the Bahamas. That will be followed by an Under-20 World Cup in South Korea, and then the big one of the year, which will be the Confederations Cup in Russia, which will obviously be the dry run for the World Cup there, using a couple of the stadiums there, and that will be a very good competition. I think there's some very, very good sides that are going to be going up against each other in that tournament. In around that, you've got another round of World Cup qualifying in June with some interesting games there, particularly tasty one between the U.S. and Mexico, which I think will be highly politically charged, to say the least. So it's we're starting to go into a very busy period of the year here with things at FIFA, and certainly with FIFA.com.
Simon Fudge. You can follow Simon on Twitter at SimonFudge74. Thank you very much for your time, Simon, this morning.
Thank you.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee here, solo. You can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramee, and follow this show at Soccer Today SPN. Every audio that we do here on the Sports Podcasting Network is available at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Wow. What a day in the Premier League yesterday. What a glorious day for Chelsea. Beat Man City. That's why Duane is not here today. He's hiding from the chirping. Well, I'll remember tomorrow to chirp Duane about Chelsea's glorious win at the Bridge versus Man City. A highly contested game, highly technical. Geez, those players are good. You know what I was thinking about when I was watching this? Simon alluded earlier on the show, the quality. Sometimes we see a lot of mistakes. There are not a lot of mistakes at that level. There is some. We've seen Courtois and we see Caballero do mistakes, but the players, wow, the tactical skills, it's so impressive. That's why people say it's battle of the managers, because the players are so good that the difference between them is marginal. And I know it's not necessarily true. You have outliers, but what I'm saying is the players are so good. The teams are so well trained. They're so well focused and organized, and the game is at a different level than it's been before. I remember seeing those videos of George Best, or there were no 4-2-3-1 organized for in that time, right? In theory, there was, but the tactical knowledge, the game, the evolution of the game, and the revolution at some point, different times in history. We go back to the Naranje with the total football and other different revolution of the tactical world. Like it evolved. It's such a wow. It's beautiful to see. Yeah, I would love to see more supporter culture, of course, and those type of things in the Premier League. But when you watch games like this one yesterday, that has a lot on the line. Chelsea, Man City. Chelsea had just lost to Crystal Palace. Their lead had dwindled down at the top of the table. And if Man City would have got the result, the whole table would have been wide open, like 5 points. You would have 4 points, I think, to Tottenham because they won their game. It would have been wide open. Now, with Chelsea's victory, it still will be difficult for Chelsea to lose. It's not over until it's over, yes. But Chelsea are on the road to the Premier League title, and they're on their way there if the status quo remains. If they can not necessarily win out, but win the games they have to win. And the tougher ones, well, it can go either way. But for Chelsea, they did have some injury problems. Victor Moses missed the game, and second straight for Chelsea. And you do see the difference without Moses on the left defensive wing, how he comes in and how he stretches the field, stretches the option. He gives the other option that overlaps and that frees up space for the likes of Pedro, the likes of Hazard. Moses is very useful in that sense, and hopefully it's not a prolonged absence in his case. For Man City, it's a tough game. They had that goal, that lucky bounce went their way, and they buried it. But for Man City, it's a difficult run in the last few weeks. It's now going to be just maintain the Champions League position is the goal. The title is almost all but gone, and now they're going to have to focus. And fortunately for City, other teams like Arsenal are struggling, and now for the first time in a long time, I can't remember even when, I think it's over 20 years, it might not be the top four for Arsenal, and that is very unfortunate. They still have a shot of winning the FA Cup, would give them an opportunity for Europe, but it will be very difficult for Arsenal to get into the top four because Chelsea ain't going on anywhere. Tottenham with a great victory this weekend, the comeback win against Swansea late in the game. Oh, Kalansky, why didn't you get sent off when you were quit while you're ahead? They say, but no, you wanted to stay on the pitch as the goalkeeper, even though you were injured. With the adrenaline when it first happened, you felt great and you were able to stop, and that's why you didn't want to get subbed off. But then it catches up to you, and then you get scored 3 times in a very quick. And what you want to do? You lose you lose a game that was very worthy for you because you would have almost secured non-relegation. You would have secured Premier League football almost for next year with those 3 points. Now with a defeat still up in the air, and with the rise of Hall, Crystal Palace winning some games, it's becoming more clear that Sunderland are the Black Cats are running out alive is the narrative. Sunderland will get relegated, but teams like Swansea are not out of the question. Borough, so Borough, Sunderland are almost for sure going down. Who's the third one? Swansea could fit that bill because Burnley, with their results so far, another win on Tuesday at home. Burnley with the best home record in the Premier League this year, I believe, if not close to it. Burnley were able to win against Stoke. And if you really want to have a laugh, it happened on Tuesday. I forget his name. Stoke player was about to do a corner. He slips, falls, touches the ball with his head ball. The ball goes to the other side. That was hilarious. But going back on Tottenham and the top four, Arsenal will have a lot of difficulty cracking that top four because Liverpool, even though Bournemouth was a draw at Anfield, Bournemouth really giving Liverpool a lot of trouble in 2017. But Liverpool, Manchester City, Tottenham, and Chelsea seems to almost be a lock. Man United can get close to it and come back after, but Arsenal, Man United are going to have to battle hard to get in. It's going to be just a battle of City, United, and Arsenal trailing back a little, and Liverpool for those two spots because while Chelsea and Tottenham aren't going anywhere. So who's going to be third, who's going to be fourth, and who's going to the Europa League? That is the question. So we'll keep an eye on the schedule this weekend. It continues. Tottenham Watford. So White Hart Lane could be a not necessarily an easy game, but a good result for Tottenham. Chelsea is on the road to Bournemouth. So Chelsea will want to get a victory right there to continue Battle of the Cities. Man City, Hull City on Saturday as well. Liverpool's at the Britannia at Stoke on Saturday. Sunday, Sunderland at home against Man United, Everton, Leicester, and on Monday for Monday Night Football, Crystal Palace at home against Arsenal. Can Sam Allardyce and his team continue on a run? That is the question. They did lose 3-1 to Southampton on the road. And Sam Allardyce mentioned before that game, after the big win they had against Chelsea, when you have a big win, when you're a smaller club, when you're, I don't want to say a minnow, but when you're battling for relegation against a top of the league team, when you get that big upset win, you're on the high, and sometimes the game after is very difficult, especially when it just comes mere days after. And after their big win on Saturday against Chelsea, now it's Wednesday and they're going to Southampton. And to replicate the desire, the will, the hunger that you showed against the top of the league, against the Southampton, is different. And to replicate that type of performance twice in a row on the road is not necessarily an easy task to do, and they failed at that task. Now, to make sure that they continue on a positive run in the relegation battle, Crystal Palace and Sam Allardyce needs 3 points, and they have the possibility to make Arsenal situation even worse. What if Crystal Palace in a London derby beats Arsenal at the Palace? What if? What if the Eagles grab that cannon and drops it off a cliff? Wenger out will continue to become a worldwide phenomenon. Wherever you see signs in the world, Wenger out has been seen. Geez, there's Wenger out graffitis appearing in every cities in the world now almost. It's become a meme. It's a trope. It's more than a meme now. And if Sam Allardyce and Crystal Palace gets the job done at home against Arsenal, the Alexis Sanchez discussion will continue. Even though we might not want to single out one incident, one aspect that drove this team in a downward spiral, if you're looking at the dust up, alleged dust up, apparently, well, guess what? There's a drastic dip in form right after it. Is there correlation between the two? I think so. And I think we will see the actual situation of Arsenal and Crystal Palace on Monday. If Palace wins, wow. First of all, Sam Allardyce would have continued to surprise everybody because when he first took over at Crystal Palace, the result didn't come at the beginning, and everybody was talking about, oh, well, for the first time maybe ever, Sam Allardyce is going to be relegated, you know? But you know what? It took a little longer than usually. Big Sam did shore up that defense, and Big Sam did give his team a better shot at victory by making sure they don't leak goals. As it stands right now, Sunderland dead last, 20th with 20 points. Middlesbrough 19th with 23 points. Swansea 18 with 28 points. So Swansea's only 2 points away from Hull, but because of Hull's victory and Swansea's loss, Swansea went back into the relegation zone. Hull City climbed up. With their defeat now, a victory would have been really useful for Big Sam and the Eagles last week against Southampton, well, Tuesday, because now they're only 31 points and they're getting close. Those 3 points would have been really useful because they would have surpassed West Ham. West Ham 15th with 33, Burnley 14th with 35 points, Bournemouth 35, Stoke 12th with 36, Leicester 11th with 36. Yeah, there's not a lot of points. The gap between 16th, which is Crystal Palace, and Southampton, which is 9th, is 6 points. That's crazy. You can be a top 10 team or fighting for relegation depending on the next 2-3 games go. There's only 7 to 8 weeks left. Well, there's 8 to 9 weeks left depending on which teams you are. United and Arsenal have 29 games played. The rest of the table usually 30 with a few 31s. So there's between 7 and 9 games left to play in this year in the Premier League. And the point difference between here, let's take it even further. The point difference between the last relegation spot, 18th, which is 28 points, to Southampton is 9 points. So you can be you can be relegated or top 10 team, and that's a 9 point. That's 3 wins in a row with the right results going your way somewhere else that you can bridge that gap if it's possible. So 9 points separating relegation to the top 10 in the Premier League. Who said parity was not interesting? Nobody ever. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramee. Follow this show at Soccer Today SPN. Duane will be back, should be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. for another edition of Soccer Today. Tomorrow, the games of the week. We'll be talking about preview the big games in Major League Soccer this weekend with the Montreal Impact Friday night game at 10 p.m. tomorrow versus the LA Galaxy in LA. Will be interesting to see how Montreal can play against a very beatable LA team in 2017. It's almost not a statement game, but Montreal, unbeaten in 3 but winless this season, will want to get a victory. And can they pull an upside? Because yeah, LA at home, they're going to be the favorite still, but we've seen LA struggle. And last week with Vancouver's performance, 3 late goals to get 3, well, not late, but 3 quick goals to get the victory at home. Well, will LA want to come back strong after a bad performance, or can Montreal get the point Nacho Piatti won't be playing? So we'll keep an eye on that situation in the next few hours to get ready for tomorrow night. Until then, tomorrow, 10 a.m. for Soccer Today, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.